Okay, hi BookTube, Aaron here, hope you're doing very well. Today we're going to be carrying on with the library tour. There's been a bit of a reshuffling, and luckily I've remembered where we were up to, but it basically just means that the first two books today are going to be from the end of the shelf from last time, and then hopefully I'll go quite quickly and then we can just go through the whole of the next shelf. So the two from that were on this shelf but have moved up in the reshuffle are Don't Look Now and Other Stories by Daphne du Maurier. Quite a cool cover there. I really like the opening story, and there's some pretty interesting, some other pretty interesting stories in here as well. But really, the opening story is, and the title story, Don't Look Now, is really what steals the show. So I'd recommend it just for that alone. There's only really one story in here that I really didn't like, and that was called The Way of the Cross, which is the penultimate story in there. Just felt like nothing really happened, and she was just playing around with some characters for the sake of it. And then the other one that moved up a shelf was Justine by Lawrence Durrell, which I'm hoping to get to soon. But I really like Durrell's poetry, at least what I've read of it so far. So I quite like to get to these since they're really what he's known for more than anything else at the moment. Then moving on to the actual main shelf. First up, we've got a fair bit of Umberto Eco. So we've got The Name of the Rose. We've got Foucault's Pendulum, which might be the next one that I try. I have heard it's quite difficult, which is why I keep putting it off. Or I might just go back to The Name of the Rose, and every time I try a new Umberto Eco book, I might try and just reread The Name of the Rose first and then go into the next one. I'm not sure. And then the other one I haven't read yet is The Island of the Day Before, which I don't know too much about. And so that's the main reason why I haven't got to it yet, I suppose. And then we've got Baudolino, which I really quite enjoyed. It's a really odd book about, I suppose Italy in the Middle Ages and the Holy Roman Empire sort of coming in, and our main character is a bit of a teller of tall tales, and I suppose the whole story is about sort of believing tall tales or believing in something, and I suppose just by just the sheer force of that belief in some way, shape or form that actually turns out to be true, just maybe not always in the way you'd expect. Then next up we've got some George Eliot. Neither of these I've read yet. We've got Daniel Deronda in Oxford World Classics. And then we've got Silas Marner as well. All I've read so far is it called Cousin Jacob, I think, or Brother Jacob? I think it's Cousin Jacob, which I had to read at uni. I can't remember all that much about it, but that's all I've read so far from George Eliot, so I need to get on it at some point. Another book I'd really like to read soon, and that's Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I've heard the opening of this book, the sort of prologue of this book being read out, and it sounds really, really good. And even though it's a fairly chunky book, it's sort of just over 500 pages, but if it's like that all the way through, then I think I'll enjoy it. Then we've got, I'll just move my llamas. We've got Hans Fallada, Alone in Berlin. I think in America this book is known as A Man Always Dies Alone or something like that. It's about sort of resistance in Berlin during the Second World War, about a couple who are getting on in years receiving a letter that their son has died in the front, and then I suppose the rage that they feel, even though they're very quiet, sort of law-abiding citizens, very unassuming. Um, but that's kind of what tips them over the edge, and the husband starts writing these anti-Nazi postcards, and he just drops them here and there in Berlin, and it's about I suppose the kind of entangled life of some of the people they meet, and also the people trying to find out uh, who's leaving these postcards and some of the consequences of that investigation as well. So it's a really, really good book. Very brutal, quite dark, but really good. And then some William Faulkner. We've got As I Lay Dying, which I think is the pick this year for Faulkner in August. I think I will join in and reread that, since it's been a while since I've read it. Then Light in August, which is my favourite Faulkner book and maybe one of my all-time favourite novels, although with almost every novel that I read, I'm constantly reshuffling that, but I think it still does hold a dear place in my heart. Then Absalom, which I read for the first time last year, a kind of the fall of a family, a guy's obsession to make a name for himself, and how history intervenes, and I suppose how his own history, I suppose, intervenes. I don't particularly know how else to say it. Then we've got Go Down Moses as well, which is a sort of interconnected short story collection, I suppose. I think the short story The Bear, which is fairly famous, is in here. I have read this, but I can barely remember anything about it. And I can kind of remember not particularly enjoying it when I was reading it. So it might be one where I'll try and read a few more of his books, and then I'll go back to Go Down Moses and reevaluate it. Then a little pile of F. Scott Fitzgerald. We've got The Beautiful and Damned, which I really quite like. I suppose it's one of the I don't know. I feel like this probably gets talked about the least when it comes to his books. This Side of Paradise, I suppose, has I suppose with it being the debut, then at least every now and then someone's going to bring it up, and then obviously The Great Gatsby, and then Tender Was the Night as well. They both get talked about a fair bit, but I don't hear that many people talking about The Beautiful and Damned, but I quite liked it. I do have a copy of Gatsby, but it's not up here. But then we do have Tender Is the Night, which I haven't read yet, and out of his complete novels, his 4 complete novels, is the only one that I haven't read yet. Just realising next to there then normally would be Madame Bovary by Flaubert. It looks like this. This is the dust jacket that I still need to repair. I try to keep it nearby the book as a reminder that I need to fix it up and then reattach it to the book. I'm planning to read that soon, and so that's downstairs waiting to be read. Then we've got Parade's End by Ford Madox Ford, which I would really like to get to. This might be a contender for March of the Mammoths at some point, maybe even next year. Then we've got the death of Artemio Cruz, terribly mispronouncing that name, by Carlos Oh dear, by Carlos Fuentes, translated by Alfred McAdam. It seems to be that kind of book where someone's dying and then looking back at their life, but you've sort of got the history of Mexico. I can't remember exactly when. Yeah, sort of around the period of the Mexican Revolution, which I don't know all too much about, so it would be hopefully entertaining and educational. But we'll see whether that's the case. Then we've got Tales of Mystery and the Macabre by Elizabeth Gaskell. I have not read anything by Elizabeth Gaskell. We do have, I think, in one of the past tours, we've got a copy of Ruth, and we've probably got Cranford downstairs. I don't think we own a copy of North and South. I'll have to have a look, but all that being said, I still haven't read anything by Gaskell yet, and yeah, this is just a collection of her ghost stories. And then a couple of books by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. We've got the Yellow Wallpaper, and then we've got Herland, which is a I don't know, a satirical utopian book about can't remember it's three male explorers who come across a society that's completely female, and they have discovered, or maybe I can't remember whether they've discovered or evolved in a way that they actually don't need a man to reproduce. They don't need men in their society, so they haven't been any men in their society, and it's I suppose just a brief look at what a completely female society might look like, but also then what would it be like then if three men just happened to stumble upon it as well. So it is quite funny. I think it is supposed to be taken slightly tongue in cheek. Then we've got some Goethe. We've got A Man of 50. And this is, I think, a story about a guy. I think essentially he wants to give his son away to a young woman, but then finds that the young woman is in love with him, I think. And so it's sort of a comedic meditation on aging. I think this is all I own of Goethe at the moment, but I think I'll read this because I'm umming and ahhing about trying to read everything by Goethe, but maybe I should just read one slim thing by him before making any rash decisions. Then a really great writer that I've really grown to love and enjoy, got Nikolai Gogol, and The Earth Will Sit on the Moon, Essential Stories. I really love these Pushkin Press editions, and this is probably one of my favourites of the ones I own. And this has got his famous stories in here. It's got The Nose, it's got Diary of a Madman, it's got The Overcoat, and then it's also got Old World, Landowners, and The Carriage, which I think represents some of his earlier stuff. But just really odd, surreal stories that I suppose in some of the ways the characters behave and in some of the characters' aspirations, I can see that reflected in Tolstoy, and in Dostoevsky, and in lots of other Russian and European writers who came after Gogol. But the most obvious comparison that's normally made is between Gogol and Kafka for that just strange, phantasmagorical kind of thing. Since The Nose is a story where a man wakes up to find that his nose is missing, and I suppose shares the formula with Kafka, where if the person didn't wake up, then everything would be fine. I think it was Jim from Jim's books, reading and stuff, who I think pointed that out in a comment. If they didn't wake up, they'd be fine. Then we've got Maxim Gorky, Fragments from My Diary. I said recently in a video that I really love these Penguin 20th century editions. So I've got a few of them hanging around, and I really quite like them. And I suppose this really shouldn't be in here, or at least in this section, since technically it's non-fiction, but it's somehow ended up in with the fiction, and I'm not going to really, I'll just turn a blind eye to it in this instance. Then we've got King Solomon's Mines by H. Rider Haggard. I have a feeling I read this when I was little, but I can't really remember. So I should get around to rereading it at some point. And even though we are, as I'm filming this, in spring for adventure, it seems like the kind of thing I'd want to read in July or August. It just seems like a kind of summer holiday book to me. Then we've got The Glass Key by Dashiell Hammett, which is the only Hammett book that I've read. And I can't remember all too much about this, with the exception of potentially the opening, sort of the body being found, and then a sort of a set piece later on where the detective gets beaten up. That's pretty much all I can remember from this. So I'd quite like to reread it at some point, and I'd like to get some more Dashiell Hammett as well. Then some Thomas Hardy. We've got the Woodlanders, which might be the next Hardy that I get to. And it's just very much about a little community. I suppose how sort of changes in maybe in technology. I have a feeling it's got something to do with a railway coming, but I'm not entirely sure. I might be wrong there. But just about how it's changed irrecoverably. Not speaking very well today. And it's got a love story as well. But this might be the next Thomas Hardy that I read. It's been a little while since I read some Hardy. And then we've got Far from the Madding Crowd as well, which is my favourite Hardy. I think I do really like Jude the Obscure as well. But there's something about Far from the Madding Crowd that just makes me feel happy and nostalgic whenever I see it. Then we've got The Good Soldier Sveik and His Fortunes in the World War by Jaroslav Hasek. Probably both pronunciations were wrong. This is another contender for March of the Mammoths, I think. It's a fairly chunky one. Okay, it's about 700 odd pages, but it's got those original and very recognisable illustrations in there as well. I've had this sitting around for a little while now, so I should get to it before too long. And the same goes for the next one, really, and it's the last one for today, and that's the Scarlet Letter and Other Tales by Nathaniel Hawthorne, with a very seemly cover there. And so far I haven't read anything by Hawthorne. Being on this side of the Atlantic, he's not really a writer that we had to read at school or anything like that. And so more or less everything I've heard about Hawthorne has been from people who had to read him in school over in the US. So eventually I'll pick this up and find out what all the fuss is about. But that's it. So that is the bookshelf tour for today, from the letters D through to H. And next week, or whenever it'll be, we'll be continuing with the letter H and going through to O, which sounds riveting. Thank you for watching this installment. I hope you found it interesting, and hopefully we'll be back soon for another one. Take care. Bye bye.